This episode of Bullet Heaven was made using the Retrobit 2.4 GHz wireless Saturn controller from Stoneage Gamer. The well of indie and doujin shooting games on Steam continues to grow ever deeper, with new titles being introduced all the time. Thing is, a lot of these games have very similar quality. Many are good to great, and often have to rely on their presentations to really stand apart. Thankfully, this isn't quite one of those titles. The Adventures of Ten Until is a Danmaku Tate vertical shooter developed solely by Toro Nishino, and it was published by Lion Wing Publishing on May 6, 2020. Ten Until embraces a striking super low-res aesthetic and combines it with a unique set of gameplay elements. So, how does it shake things up? Let's take a closer look. Outside of its typical 8-way movement, The Adventures of Ten Until does a lot of neat things with a fairly simple concept. Players can switch between two different characters, the titular Ten and Till, at any time with the press of a button. Each has her own shot type, speed, and bomber. Ten, a cat girl dressed in a dark grey school uniform, wields a boken sword and shoots in a concentrated, linear fashion. Her bomber also fires straight ahead and deals serious damage while active. However, its area of effect makes it more useful against bosses. Her friend Till is a dancer clad in white. She holds a pair of maracas and fires in a spread pattern that allows for more enemies to be hit, but with a lower rate of damage. Her bomber is more of the general screen clearing variety and does a good job of taking stuff out regardless of where they are. Both Ten and Till have long-range and short-range versions of their fire as well. The longer-range shots have the advantage of hitting enemies on the other side of the screen, and short-range cuts their distance considerably but has much more power behind them. Short-range fire also results in better scoring opportunities, which we'll take a look at shortly. Players can upgrade their shots by picking up golden power-ups. Ten and Till's fire will become larger and more powerful the higher the level is, to a maximum of 5. Both Ten and Till's fire will be enhanced with each pickup, allowing for more flexibility without the need of switching characters just to upgrade the other side. Bombers will also clear all enemy shots from the screen and convert them to bonus pickups regardless of who is in play. Bombers can also be replenished by shooting certain sparkly terrain to uncover them, allowing for extras in the stock for when the going gets tough. In an interesting twist, the whole bomb stock will carry over to the next life, meaning that they can be stockpiled for a do-or-die situation. But if players have fewer than 3 when they die, they will be replenished on the next life. Ten and Till's movement rates are decent. Ten has a better speed rating than Till, but the speed of either will be maintained when firing. However, players can also hold the change button to focus movement and display Ten and Till's hitbox. This hitbox is visually a bit bigger in relation to their size in this title, on account of the super low-res visuals. However, it's also very forgiving. Players will be able to easily sneak through many bullet patterns that appear to clip the hitbox, but don't. That's not to say that Ten and Till is a cakewalk though, in fact it's quite the opposite starting in stage 5. There will be all sorts of shots coming from all kinds of places that will have players guessing where there's even safety. In our case, we usually just hedge our bets and pull a diagonal cut to the bottom of the screen and hope nothing finds the hitbox. And it works a lot of the time. Thankfully, for those times that things get a little too hairy for their own good, a shield can be acquired to protect players from bullet impacts. Obtained in the same fashion as shot power-ups, this shield can be reinforced up to 3 times with subsequent pickups, allowing for players to take multiple hits before being worn away. The shield also factors into scoring as well, but more on that later. When a player finally does end up losing a life, they will eject a number of power-ups and shields for collection on the next life. When players lose their whole life stock, the game is over, with only limited continues to see the end. But Ten Until also features a continue system whereby players can start the game at the last stage they made it to with the amount of lives, shields, and bombers they had when they did it. The credits are restocked in this manner too, allowing players additional chances to at least see the normal end of the game. Of course, for the kind of shooter this is, there's also a lot of game to play here as well. The Adventures of Ten and Till plays over the course of 9 main stages, with a special 10th stage available through certain conditions. A full playthrough will take quite a while to get through, and the challenge in later stages definitely makes for a good amount of replay, if only to get good enough to see the true final boss. Additional credits also open up with extended playtime. And it's pretty fun, all told. We'll get into more reasons for that in a second, but the gameplay hooks and control are quite decent indeed. Different enough that it stands out, and simple enough for anyone to be able to effectively play, almost to the point of being bare bones. All of the features in 10 Until work well to make it a very solid game, but there is one major catch to all of this. While the controls function very well, the default mapping to any controller the player might have is totally buggered up. Different controllers will have different mapping too. Our Saturn USB controller had fire map to R, pause to L, bomber to X, change to C, and character change to Y. Our Duke had fire map to start, while bombs were mapped to A and character change to the left bumper. Completely messed. We also used the Saturn wireless 2.4 GHz pad, and it had a totally different mapping as well. So, before playing, be sure to access the controller config menu in the local files found through the Steam menu. It will be the only way to guarantee a proper setup, and 10 Until will be much more enjoyable as a result. We also had a really hard time figuring out where exactly a hit is actually registered between the player's hitbox and the bullet's collision boundary. Players will be able to get through really narrow gaps between large bullets, but small ones are less, squishy, we guess? I don't know. It's questionable is what we're saying, especially when the screen fills up, and boy does it fill up. It's a complete crapshoot as to where the player can go for safety. It's basically a 50-50 split as to if the player will get hit when traversing full walls of bullets to safety. This, of course, made the game feel pretty half-baked. The game also has a tendency to slow down considerably in full screen, especially when it's being recorded. For such a lightweight title, which can run on a Celeron processor, it's a little confusing, especially running on our comparatively behemoth PC with nothing else in the background. Regardless, the gameplay, once everything is ironed out, makes for a decent time, even if the squishy bullet collision can be frustrated, and especially in crowded scenes. Thankfully, the scoring system could carry 10 Until quite a ways. The best scoring systems in shoot-'em-ups are the ones that don't implode upon themselves with mechanics so numerous they can't be kept track of at a glance, or using one of our videos, Cave. 10 Until scoring system is light and fun with a decent risk-reward, though it's also quite a bit on the simple side. The key to getting big scores early on is to build a multiplier by getting close to enemies. When in range, the enemy in question will brighten up and add to a counter in the top left-hand corner of the screen when defeated. The player can even maintain this counter from stage to stage, so long as they don't get hit. It should be mentioned that not every enemy can be comboed up in this manner. Some will not brighten regardless of proximity. Obviously, if a player loses a life, the counter will completely reset, but even with shields in play, a portion of the bonus multiplier will be lost when hit. All defeated enemies will also drop a small collectible medal that will be drawn immediately to the player. This will add to the score over time, especially since they grow in relation to the current multiplier. Cleared bullets are also collected in this manner as well, with boss encounters in particular sometimes resulting in some decent numbers when they fall. Then there's the shield bonus. When players collect shields beyond maximum, a chime will sound indicating an additional multiplier for enemy kills in general. This bonus can even be stacked with additional pickups, so if a player has 3 additional shields beyond maximum, a 4 times multiplier will be awarded for every enemy kill. Additional power-ups also grant an extra 1,000 points per pickup beyond maximum power. This is more or less the extent of the scoring in 10 Until though. There is no stage end bonus of any kind, so getting through the game while taking no damage is primarily how the highest scores will be achieved. There are also no online leaderboards, but the player's score will display before the game starts, allowing for players to screen cap their exploits and post it to a forum of their choice. The adventures of 10 Until may claim inspiration from games like Dodonpachi and others from Cave, but in addition to the gameplay, the sights and sounds here are quite a departure in general. But anyone going into this game looking for the next Galuda might be a bit disappointed. At least 10 Until's presentation is pretty good. Visually, 10 Until is quite a bit chunkier than any 32-bit game we've ever played. Packing in the kind of detail a game like this needs in what ends up being an overly confined space can be challenging, but 10 Until does manage to pull it off. There are all kinds of animations and a good amount of charm to the visuals, from the enemies to the backgrounds. But there are also times like this encounter that the imagery is just awesome, with a simple but very effective parallax depth that will surely surprise many players. The great character design works well when shrunken down to in-game sprites too, despite the limited amount of pixels available for the player and villain characters. Once again though, the hitbox and bullet collection boundaries are sketchy at best. This suggests that the hitbox and bullets are much smaller than they visually appear. But then there's the sound. The OST in 10 Until is simply one of the best we've heard this year. The placid first stage, the pounding third, and even soothing tracks in further stages make for a very diverse track list that begs to be heard. The sound effects are a bit less impressive, but still work well for their applied purposes. Rounding out the presentation is one of the most adorable title logos we've seen in some time. Wallpapers to accompany the bordered-off Tate playfield, and the simplest menu of all time given that the most robust options are not in the game's interface. But the game also lacks a rotational mode for Tate displays, as well as a clearly defined full-screen mode. For those wondering, and yes, it's as confusing as the default controls, full screen is activated by pressing Enter. But in the end, how does the Adventures of 10 Until stack up? Let's take a look. How the controls in this game actually function isn't the issue here. The real problem is finding an actual controller that works in an intuitive way. The buttons and features are auto-mapped in some really messed up ways. Thankfully, there is a controller setup executable, but it's also a pain to get to, and X-pads don't seem to be supported yet. 10 Until starts off easy, but ramps up fiercely, and maybe a bit cheaply, around halfway through. However, there's also some seriously iffy bullet and hitbox boundaries, and some of the later stages get completely clusterfucked. With 9 core stages and a 10th special stage as well as true last boss conditions, there's a decent amount of game to play here, and a typical full playthrough can go on for about an hour. 10 Until looks alright despite the super low-res theme, but some encounters are still absolutely stunning. Easily the strongest part of 10 Until is its amazing soundtrack. Chill and relaxing at points, soothing at others, and heart-pounding when it needs to be, the care taken with producing this OST is clearly evident. 10 Until has fairly simple mechanics, paired with the kind of risk-reward that encourages more daring play. Gameplay like this also allows for some pretty high-stakes moments, and everything wall-to-wall is made by just one guy. The Adventures of 10 Until weighs in at about $12 US, which offers a good value for what's here. The Adventures of 10 Until was only a minor blip on our radar when we first caught wind of it, but it ended up being a pretty fun time in the end. This is a game that won't set the world ablaze with the kind of gameplay found in white-knuckle shooters like Rolling Gunner, but as a simple diversion to chill out to, and maybe push the scoring system for a few rounds, 10 Until fits the bill. But as fun as it is, there are still issues here that make it less than ideal. For that, The Adventures of 10 Until gets a 3.5 out of 5. You can get a copy of The Adventures of 10 Until on Steam for about $12 US. We have some great new episodes coming up, including a brand new look at the new Astroport Shmups collection from Pixel Heart. You definitely don't want to miss it. We've also noticed an interesting spike in our subscriber numbers, so here's a question: where did you all come from? Let us know in the comments below.
Be sure to like, comment, and of course, subscribe. We finally got a copy of Hyperduel for the Sega Saturn, and we'll be reviewing it once we hit 10,000 subscribers.